never know when that moment is. So, hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ and Friends. I'm your host, Chef AJ. Today is the first Tuesday of the month, which means it's time for Straight Talk with Dr. Doug Lisle, where he answers your questions. We make every effort to get the questions from the chat, but we always give priority to the ones that were sent in advance. So if you'd like your question to go to the top of the queue, please email us at help@chefaj.com. And without further ado, Dr. Doug Lisle. Hello, how you doing?
Hey, how you doing? Good to see you.
Are you allowed to say where you are? Because I know a friend of yours is very excited about where you are.
Oh, I'm in Florida and with Dr. Alan Goldhammer, and I'm being very carefully fed because Alan's wanting to make sure that we do well in this tournament. So I have to eat really healthy food this week.
Yeah. If you win this basketball tournament, do you get a trophy? Do you get accolades? What will happen?
I don't know what it is. It's a big fancy national tournament, Masters basketball, and it's a big tournament. So we now qualify for the 65 to 70 group, which amazingly enough, it's the most attended group. In other words, so they're retired, so they can go and leave for a week and go to Florida. So yeah, but it's going to be really tough. I mean, there's players in here that used to play in the NBA.
You're kidding.
No. So this is serious business, and so we've been out there. We've actually seen some of the players, and we're going to be able to play with them, but we don't have any idea. Our team is not that strong. We have a 6'6" guy and a 6'4" guy, but the team we're playing today has 2 6'9" players. So we're in some hot water, but we're gonna have fun.
And this isn't televised. We can't watch this.
No.
Darn, that would be.
But believe me, if I do anything good, I'm going to brag all about it. Nobody is going to be able to verify otherwise.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, we have about 5 questions that were previously submitted. And since I'm wearing my vegan t-shirt today, I'll ask the one from Rob first. And he would like to know, Dr. Lisle, are you vegan? And what does a typical day of eating look like for you?
Yeah, I would say there's different definitions of vegan. So now I've considered myself vegan for, I don't know, a long time, 30 years. But that's until I met Michael Clapper. And it's like, oh no, you're not a vegan, Doug. You've got a leather belt, some leather in your shoes, and hell, you got leather in your car. That's not a vegan. And so so I think we have to restrict that. You know what I mean? There's people that aren't going to use, I don't know, hair gel because it had some animal thing in it. So no, if you do that, you're not a vegan. So I got friends like that. And so it's interesting. They can't help themselves. That's how they see the world, and they are very disturbed at animals being exploited. And so for them, that's what a vegan is. And if you're not that, you're not a vegan. If you talk about diet, then yes, I'm a vegan. So typically, well, this week we've had whole wheat pasta with a low sodium natural tomato sauce and vegetables, steamed vegetables, and the oatmeal in the morning with fruit, pineapple, blueberries, strawberries. Had tostadas, which use corn tortillas baked and then have black beans and brown rice and some low sodium salsa and avocado. And this is what we're eating. Very good veggie burger. I don't know what the make was, but I told Alan it was really good, and he showed it to me as some super healthy thing. So yeah, that's that's the kind of thing, and steamed vegetables at every lunch or dinner along with it, and salad with obviously just some balsamic vinegar dressing. Yeah, that's what we're eating.
Sounds great. Well, we wish you every success, and we hope to hear you brag very soon about defeating the pro players.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's always got to be at least one question on weight loss. Yeah. So this is from Elizabeth. Dr. Lisle, I have to lose 60 pounds to even be at a healthy BMI. I wish I could be a volume eater so I could eat a lot of food, but I've always eaten very small portions of very rich vegan foods like vegan chicken nuggets and fries dipped in mayo. I always use small salad plates for my meal since I feel like I have a small stomach and can't eat very much at one sitting. I can usually eat lower caloric foods for 2 or 3 weeks using sheer willpower, but then I give up and grab a bag of fries and mayo again to get up my calories. Is there a way for me to make the shift to experiencing the joy of eating a lot of food while losing weight?
Well, let me kind of walk people through. I mean, people have probably heard me talk about this several times already, but this is such a central problem for people, and not everybody. Sometimes when you hear an explanation, you need to hear something that's complicated 10 times before you get it. So the fundamental problem is going to be calorie density. That is the problem. So after all the research has been done in the last 20 years and everybody pretending that, oh, no, it has to do with protein, or no, it has to do with fat, or no, it has to do with carbohydrate, and no, you can't eat carbs, you have to eat protein. And like, there's no end to the talk out of ignorance. The bottom line is that when all of the research has been compiled and analyzed, there is only one variable that matters, and that is the calorie density of the diet. Okay. Now, there are some rules to the calorie density of the diet. So, for example, if you eat a handful of raisins, which are 14 or 1500 calories a pound, and then drink a glass of water, you did not dilute them. Okay. The water is already separated from the raisins, and it will pass immediately through into the small intestine. It will not sit in the stomach and cause stretch reception to be activated over the next 40 minutes or an hour under digestion. The raisins will stay in the stomach. They will wind up being the material that is being analyzed. They will stretch the stomach out depending upon how much you ate. So if you ate 10 of them, there's not going to be much stretch at all. As a result, there's almost no impact of satiety. Doesn't matter if you drink a gallon of water. So one of the myths out there is that, oh, drink a glass of water before you eat dinner and then you'll eat less. It's like, no, you will not. Anybody that ever did that, they say, well, really? What if I drink a gallon? What then? And the answer is you're just going to eat an hour later after you go pee. You're eventually going to absorb all that water and deal with it. And then you're going to be just as hungry as you would have been otherwise. So distending the stomach through use of water that's already been isolated will not work. However, if the water's embedded in the food, it will work, because that's how the system was designed. The system was designed to be having materials go into it, and for there to be a very sophisticated physical and chemical analysis of whatever it is that you put in your stomach. And it's going to turn out that typical person, small person, might eat 3 or 4 pounds of food a day. A bigger person might eat 4 or 5 pounds of food a day. But it's something like that. That I've known people that are raw fooders that are eating 8 pounds of food a day or whatever. But it's bizarre. Okay. That's not how the system was designed. The system was designed to be 3 to 5 pounds a day worth of food. And as we can see, if women are going to eat about 2,000 calories and men are going to eat about 2,500 typically, somewhere in that range for the species, obviously individual variation being non-trivial, it's going to turn out that we can sort of divide things and figure out what the calorie density of the diet would typically be. And it's going to turn out that it's going to be somewhere in the big range of 600 to 700 calories a pound. It's going to be typical for the species. So a modest sized woman that's going to eat 3 pounds of food a day is going to eat 680 calories a pound. She's going to eat about 2,000 calories. That's just about right. And she won't be thinking, oh, gee, I want a few more bites. No, she will be eating to satiation, and she will maintain optimum weight on a dietary configuration that looks like that if she's halfway genetically normal. Why? Because that's the calorie density that the species evolved on. So how do we know this? Well, we know this. The best evidence that we have is by looking at the Hunza in Africa, and the people in the Kalahari, and then the people in Aboriginal Australia, and the Acme Indians in the Amazon basin in Brazil. We can actually look at people who are eating a diet that is directly out of our natural history. They are doing exactly the same things that they've been doing for the last 100,000 years. And if you go visit those people, you're not going to find anybody overweight. And you're also not going to find them starving. In other words, it's going to turn out that the fluctuations of their body chemistry from season to season don't change more than 2 pounds. So, when times are good, they're a couple pounds heavier. When times are lean, they're a couple pounds lighter, but they're not actually under eating and then struggling along 10 or 15 pounds light. It happens under starvation conditions, but that's not normal for the species. So when we look at that, what we have to watch out for is the following. And that is that if we ask people, what do you think you're supposed to be eating? A hardcore vegan that's been carefully educated and has been trying to pay attention, they'll say, well, fruits and vegetables, salad and potatoes, I think, and rice, but not too much. Like that's what they're going to be saying. The problem with that analysis is that the fruit's 300 calories a pound, the vegetables are 200 calories a pound, the rice, beans, and potatoes are about 400 calories a pound, and the salad's 100 calories a pound. If you average those, they're going to average 250 calories a pound. That's a long ways from 680. Okay. If we were to analyze your diet now, we would find that if you're 60 pounds overweight, I guarantee you're not eating 680 calories a pound. You're probably eating about 850. So about 850 is about what the average human will gravitate towards under an environment where they can eat anything they want. So it's interesting that they don't eat 2,000 calories a pound. Believe me, they eat a lot of food that's 2,000 calories a pound, but they miraculously eat some other food that is lower in calorie density. And so when it all shakes down, the average American is eating about 850 calories a pound, at least according to one decent study. No, actually a meta-analysis. So I think we've got it right. So, so what's interesting is that the difference between somebody probably being 60 pounds overweight and not being 60 pounds overweight is probably 170 calories a pound. In other words, it's the difference between 850 and 680. Not very much difference. So it's subtle. And the problem is that very often what happens to people in our umbrella is they think that what they're supposed to eat is rice, beans, potatoes, salad, fruit, steamed vegetables. And they will sometimes do that because particularly if they're overweight substantially, their body's happy to accept that. In other words, they'll feel better physically. They'll start to lose weight. They start to, just everything starts to work better. And so they may drift down after a couple months, they may drift down 6 or 8 pounds, and they're actually feeling better, but they are finding themselves starting to rebel. And they're basically saying, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go eat the rich stuff. And the reason that's true, one reason that's true, is that diet has now become actually unnaturally severely low in calorie density. Now, it's not like it wouldn't be the best thing for you to continue on it, but you won't do it. And so what we have to do instead is to have a little bit of a different strategy. And the strategy is to aim at 600 to 700 calories a pound, where it is that the system was designed anyway. So effectively, what are we going to do? Well, this has been the battle and the mystery that's been inside this space for as long as I've known that this space existed. Dr. Furman's strategy has been, eat a bunch of salad, eat some steamed vegetables, careful which carbohydrates you eat, and then eat some nuts, because he would know that people were not feeling satiated. If we look at that strategy, that's taking the 4 other foods, i.e. the salad, the vegetables, the fruit, and the complex carbs, which we know will all average a low calorie density, lower than the species was designed for. And then we throw some nuts on it that are 3,000 calories a pound. In principle, that could work. And I have no doubt that he has seen success with that. And I have no doubt that there's people that have been successful with that. The problem is that it's pretty inconsistent with human natural history. So what we need to be thinking is we need to be staring at a problem that is not well known, well addressed, or well understood in the vegan community. And that is the human being was designed to eat meat. It was designed to eat a lot of it. It's designed to eat about 35% of its calories from meat. Now, meat's about 1,000 calories a pound. So when we're eating potatoes and thinking that what we should do is eat another chunk of potatoes to make up for the deficit, the truth is our brain is rebelling against that. It doesn't want to accept another potato. It's searching for something of high calorie density. And so what happens is the vegans know that they shouldn't be eating the meat and the cheese, which is 1,700 calories a pound. So, but they're not really thinking about that. They're just thinking about the evils of animal food and the cancer and the heart disease and everything else. And so they've heard that the fat that's in there is the fat that you wear, et cetera, et cetera. So the point is they know this is bad and unethical. And so what do? They turn to the only thing that looks and smells and tastes and et cetera. It pings some of these circuits of high calorie density, and that's going to be both nut derivatives and dried carbohydrates. And so it's going to be a peanut butter sandwich. It's going to be a vegan pizza. Okay. So I had somebody telling me that they were struggling with their weight, and I heard what they were eating, and they were eating this vegan pizza. And, you know, it was out of a cookbook, and they thought it was a great thing, and they really liked it. And I'm like, well, what's on it? Well, it's, you know, it's cashew, whatever it is. I'm like, you understand that the cashew cheese that you put on there is 3,000 calories a pound. Cow's milk cheese is only 1,700, for God's sakes. The vegan cheese is twice the calorie density of the animal cheese. So no wonder you're having a weight problem. So the problem that we have is that we have to figure out how we're going to strike a balance between a whole natural plant foods diet that is outstanding, but we have to figure out how to maneuver the calorie density to a location that you're okay with it. And so Alan and I this week have eaten some corn tortillas with rice and beans on the top and avocado. Okay, so let's think about that. So the corn tortilla is not very much food. It's just a slight little half an ounce or whatever it is. But it's a dried carbohydrate at 1,600 calories a pound. So we just got a little bit of something that our brain feels like is meat. Okay. And then we put some avocado on there. Aha, avocado at 900 calories a pound is very close to what meat is at 1,000-ish. So now behind the corn tortilla and the avocado, I've got what my brain is thinking is effectively a little bit of meat. What else is on there? The big starches. It's got rice and black beans and lettuce, and okay, everything's great. And so, and some onion and tomato salsa. So when you look at that, the overall calorie density is fine. It's probably 500 calories a pound. It's completely satisfying and outstanding, right? But without if you said, well, if you're really serious about weight loss, don't have the corn tortilla, eat it in a bowl. Oh, okay. And in fact, stay away from the nuts and avocado, so get rid of the avocado. Okay, so now I've gotten rid of the 900 calorie pound avocado, and I've gotten rid of the 1,600 calorie pound corn tortilla. What's left? Answer: rice and beans that are averaging 450, some lettuce that is 100, and some salsa that's basically tomatoes and onions. So that's, I don't know, 150. This is very, very low calorie density. So you're going to have me eat this bowl that's going to be probably down, 350 calories a pound, and I'm not going to be satisfied. And so if I'm not satisfied, then sooner or later, I'm going to be looking for some nuts or some dried carbohydrate in order to basically make up for what I'm perceiving to be a deficiency. So the problem is, for our questioner, is she's probably been eating 800, 900 calories a pound. And she's thinking that, whenever she does what she thinks is the right thing, she's probably taken herself all the way down to 400 calories a pound or so. And she can't sustain it. And so the solution is to understand that we have to use things like, I have a rule that I don't use dried carbohydrate unless I'm eating wet carbohydrate. So if I've got a corn tortilla, there better be a bunch of rice and beans, something like that, or quinoa or something. In other words, there better be something there that I'm eating with it that is a wet carbohydrate. So Anyway, super long story, but this is a challenge for the vegan diet. It's not insurmountable at all. It takes a little bit more learning than we thought that we needed. But it also gives us the relief that we don't have to be in a frustrating situation trying to force ourselves to gobble down 300 or 400 calories a pound as our diet. It probably should go up from there a notch. And if you do, you're going to get a lot more comfortable. And you don't have to go through the draconian drop that you think that you have. You've gone probably from 850 to 400 calories a pound. Let's aim at 600-ish calories a pound by including some of these things: tofu, pasta. So if you put tofu, pasta, avocado, and corn tortillas into your diet, rethink what that looks like and try that along with everything else you were doing when you were doing things right. And let's see what it looks like. That's how
Doesn't Dr. Esselstyn say it can take a couple of months, though, to downregulate that fat receptor? Because if she's eating a lot of high-fat foods as her primary food and not any low-calorie density food.
Yeah, I think that's true. But I mean, she's talking about how she would do it for a couple of months. So
3 weeks. She said 2 to 3 weeks.
Oh, 2 to 3 weeks. Oh, I misheard that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the downregulation stuff is not. I would agree with you, AJ. I think you're right, and the doc is right. However, we're not trying to see to it that people are happy on a 10% fat diet. That is an unrealistic goal for humans and is not necessary. Okay. So that's why things like tofu and avocado absolutely belong in this diet, because the big, massive chunks of wildebeest steak are not in the diet. And so that's what we want to do.
Right, because those are wet fats as opposed to like just putting a bunch of nuts on your salad.
Yeah, and that's why I've said this many times, and I'll say it now. If you are trying to lose weight, if you have substantial weight to lose, nuts don't belong in your diet. They don't bring you anything that you need. They can be perfectly healthy and nutritious food, but they are not necessary food. Okay. And so, and if you are a person with a weight problem, they shouldn't be in your diet. No.
Yeah. One of the viewers is asking, though, what kind of experiment could one run and what would it look like in terms of spiking the food without triggering the pleasure trap?
That's going to be an individual question. In other words, I don't, if I put corn tortillas and avocados and tofu and whole wheat pasta in my diet, it doesn't stoke anything. All it does is causes me to feel satisfied. Okay. So probably the closest thing to a enriched food, Alan just fed it to me, was a whole wheat hamburger buns with a veggie burger. That veggie burger is, I wouldn't quite call it a wet starch because it's not super wet, but it was pretty wet. And it was somewhere between a wet and a dry starch. And so closer to wet, actually. It was based, beans, rice, peas, whatever the heck it is. But that was pretty rich food. And I can tell you here an hour later after eating it, I don't feel that feeling of feeling kind of sick, a little bit overdone the way I do if I eat a dry carbohydrate. So every now and then I'll go out and eat a vegan pizza. It's like, you know what am I trying to be a saint here? I'm going to go out and have some vegan pizza. So I'll go out and have a vegan pizza. And I can tell you an hour later, I'm not feeling that great. I'm not feeling sick. I'm just not feeling good. And the reason is I crammed in a bunch of dried carbohydrate. It's really what happened. And without any real wet carbohydrate along with it. So yeah, this veggie burger that I eat, I'm kind of pleased. I don't do veggie burgers because it's too much hassle. I'm too lazy. But but that's good. I'm going to find out what that is. And because that's a big, thick, wet, basically a wet carb that made the combination. It doesn't feel like I ate a massive amount of calories either. So that's going to be a nice intermediate classic McDougall starch thing on top of a dry carb and with avocado. And I think that was all that was on there is avocado and tomato, that was outstanding and right down the middle for intermediate calorie density. And that you should be able to tolerate. And if you can't tolerate it, 30 lashes and just keep going until you do.
Did they make it the homemade, that veggie burger, or is it a commercial brand that we can find out what it is?
It's a commercial brand.
Oh, maybe you could find out what it's called. Oh,
What's that? Well, it's all gone. We threw the trash out.
darn. Okay.
Sorry about
Well,
that.
maybe you'll have
All right.
another during the week and you can let
Yeah,
us.
you can do a show with Alan. He'll tell you.
Okay, I'll ask
All right.
him. Thank you. This is a question from Jennifer about coffee. Hi, I was a regular coffee drinker, 1 to 3 cups a day for 25 years, and I stopped coffee 3 months before going to True North. I had light nausea in the morning for 43 days. I
Wow.
really enjoy the taste of coffee and have meandered back to drinking decaf at times. I've noticed that when I stop the decaf, I occasionally get a light headache in the evening. My question is, how much is the decaf hurting me, and what are the effects of the caffeine in decaf coffee? I've heard mixed evidence about dementia and Alzheimer's.
Yeah, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think anybody knows. Okay, so you're going to look at the problem. You have to look at the brain not dissimilarly to the way you look at the rest of the body. And so when the brain is going to deteriorate, it's not generally going to deteriorate in one spot. It's going to be an overall degradation of the brain in the same way that your body does. So you don't wind up with your hands looking young and beautiful, but then your legs looking old and wrinkly. No, there's a general body deterioration that will take place. Obviously, if people get out in the sun a bunch, that can be a little more sun damage than happens in the middle of your back or whatever. But the point is that the body is deteriorating a little bit at a time through the accumulation of really genetic mutations as cells divide and replicate, and then they have little tiny copying errors, et cetera. And so that's why what you are and what I am and what we all are is we're kind of the Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox. And so if you Xerox a Xerox for long enough, you finally wind up, an old man with white hair. So these people might be thinking that I'm kind of blonde, that that's what the light hair is. No, it's actually gray. All right. So where, God knows, AJ, I've completely lost.
She wants to know with Alzheimer and dementia risk, she's heard mixed things about whether or not coffee is detrimental, and is decaf detrimental?
Right. I would say that all these things to be looking at are, I'm sure that these are little mild toxins, that they are causing little disruptions. There's a little bit of sleep disruption. It's basically there's some stress that's being put on some cells in the brain by being hyperactivated through the drug. Okay. Now, generally, the way we look at this is we'd say, everybody's going to need to run their own cost benefit analysis. So do I think that this is going to be the harpoon that gets you and turns you into an Alzheimer's patient at 77? Unlikely, very unlikely. Okay. What you want to do is you want to look at it like a contributor to an overall degradation process. And so, most of us are willing to do things and to run trade-offs on such things. So, I'll have friends, I watched, much to my horror, by the way, I was like literally shocked because I thought we were all in exactly the same church. But one day I was with Doc Esselson and Dr. Campbell, and I think I was at Colin's house. And damn if they didn't pull out 2 beers and open them and start drinking. I was like, I have to tell you people, my mouth was open. Because I would never consider such a thing, because that's me. I'm like, no, I'm not drinking any alcohol. You got to be kidding me. It kills brain cells with every gulp. And here they were, and Colin looks at me and he goes, that's vegan, you know what I mean, or whatever it was, made out of grains, or like he wasn't registering that risk or that issue at the same level that I was. Okay, so I don't know. Obviously, I know that having a beer once in a while isn't going to be a big deal at all. But what is it? I would never have one because I wouldn't enjoy it. And so as a result, the price that my body pays from that little tiny bit of toxicity absolutely wouldn't have been worth it. Okay. But, would I visit Los Angeles to visit my sister? Yes. And then breathe the air from the airport over her place? Yes, I would. Is it worth it? Yeah, a little bit of degradation, a little bit of stress on the system, et cetera. So some caffeine, decaf a little bit. What can I tell you? Probably you're going to find that if anybody does a fine grained enough analysis, we're going to find that it's a little bit toxic and it's responsible for a small percentage of the damage that would be done to brains. Okay. I know one plant-based doctor thinks coffee's great for you and et cetera. And it's like, yeah, I doubt that. I know who that doc is and I kind of know how he thinks. And I think probably what he's thinking is that there's some natural chemical in the plant of the coffee that's been shown to be higher in people that are healthier in some way. In other words, he's not probably looking at a comprehensive analysis of the actual use of the coffee. If you actually use the coffee, we can tell there's trouble because when you go off of it, you can see the headaches. You can tell that there's been a drug-like effect on the nervous system, that the nervous system has basically tried to put up defenses against that thing, and now you have to go through withdrawal. And we understand that we can tell and measure in a lab the disruption of sleep that takes place in the middle of the night with as much as, half a cup of coffee. You can see it in lab data on people. And we also know that any kind of sleep deprivation is going to be increasingly associated with the deterioration of the brain that's going to result in dementia. So what do I think? I think that you do anything, it's generally the case that the more severe the impact of whatever the drug is, the more disruptive it is to do what it is that you want it to do, i.e. get you higher than a kite on cocaine, or et cetera, or give you a good buzz with a good wine. In other words, whatever the effect is, if it's a pretty big effect, we're probably going to see a pretty big price paid for long-term use on the other side. If the effect is very, very small, we're probably going to see a small price on the other end of it. So as you look at this thing and you run your cost-benefit analysis, and if you're asking me, gee, is it safe? I'd say, well, what do you mean by safe? Okay, so do you think there's any damage at all that is taking place as a result of drinking a half a cup of decaf coffee? Yeah, I do. I think there is some damage that's being done. How much do you think it is? Well, because it doesn't have a big psychogenic effect on you at that level, then it's probably not statistically likely to do very much damage. Okay. But I do not think it's benign any more than I would think that somebody that would ask me, well, gee, how about a half a glass of wine a night? Be like, well, can you feel it? Oh, yeah, I can feel it. Oh, okay. Well, if you can feel it, it's probably having enough damage that if we did it for long enough and we studied enough people, we would be able to estimate an effect of the damage. Okay. It's probably modest and it's not nearly as big a deal as, how much animal food you're eating or whether you're smoking cigarettes. So that's what I think. Now, I would think of a cup of coffee as being, I don't know, a cigarette a day. Like, okay. What do you think about that? And the answer is, it's a ding in your fender. That's how I would look at it. So that's, yeah.
Are you aware of the Forks Over Knives great oil debate with Rip Esselstyn and Dr. Garth Davis? And Forks Over Knives, the movie that you were in, is now allowing oil in their plan?
Well, yeah, I was aware that something was out there, and I don't really know what the controversy is. And I actually haven't looked at the evidence. I would know that if you put oil in a diet, I know one thing for sure, and that is that, like, it may be true that when they've studied the microbiology of this, it doesn't contribute to heart disease, and sort of Forks Over Knives was significantly about that issue as opposed to other issues. However, if we were to look at a more holistic analysis, we would take a look at that food and say, wow, that's a seriously processed food that is now unnaturally extremely concentrated. You've now concentrated the calories as concentrated as you can get. You're now at 4,000 calories a pound. Now, the next step is, okay, how much of it are we eating? oh, there's a little tiny fraction of it in my tomato sauce that I buy, then I would say irrelevant. Okay. However, if we turn out, oh no, I'm putting oil on my salad dressing every night because somebody says that it's a perfectly fine thing, there's no way in hell I would do that. Put oily salad dressing on your salad. We've now just bumped the calorie density of your diet pretty substantially. And now, what if you're thin? Okay, now we can start to have a debate. But what if you're not so thin? Okay, so that salad dressing, believe me, I've had somebody in the last 90 days to talk to me about their diet, and I went down through that diet very carefully, trying to understand why that woman was 20 or 30 pounds overweight, and we got to the salad dressing. And I'm like, well, you can't eat salad. Well, gee, it's like, well, gee, what? You're putting 200 calories of salad dressing on there. That's 4,000 calories a pound. Of course, it's not very much. Put less than an ounce on there. But that ounce is 200 calories. You're only a 2,000 calorie a pound eater. You just bumped the fat content of your diet massively all by itself. One little thing like that. And that's why you're having trouble losing that weight. And so, yeah, so we can legitimately and openly look at any scientific evidence that updates our understanding of all and any risk factors, because it isn't, as I'm trying to get across, you live in the real world and you understand that there are, are we only safe if we do everything the whole perfect natural way? No, you're not. How much less safe am I if I eat something like a whole grain bread as opposed to not eating whole grain bread, eating organically grown oats instead, and that's where I get my calories from, and I never get them from whole grain bread? And the answer is the difference is probably infinitesimal. Now, it's not infinitesimal if you are somebody that's overweight and you're eating a bunch of that bread and at 1,600 calories a pound, it's making you fat, and now that's leading to basically body morphology and disruption that is actually very significant and could have a very important impact on your health. But what if you're not? What if that, a slice or two a day of whole grain bread and you're perfectly at ideal weight? What difference is that going to make? And the answer is probably none. So, you have to look at I am certainly not doctrinaire. I'm willing to look at all of the evidence, but whenever I see something that has been very seriously fractionated and concentrated, okay, that includes supplements. Okay, I would look at oil like a supplement. It's like, whoa, that is a really massively concentrated supplement of fat calories. Like, what do I think the impact of that's going to be? And the answer is going to be, probably not great. Okay, just because we can't point to a pathological outcome, specifically right now, doesn't mean that I would trust that process. So there's no way in hell I'm going to be putting oil in my food. But if somebody puts a little dab of olive oil in my spaghetti sauce that I buy from the store, I'm not going to worry about that either. I can tell there's not much in it because I can tell by the calorie density of the sauce that it's basically entirely a bunch of tomatoes. Okay, so that's how I would look at that question.
Well, you always say when you have problems of weight or health, look to the Kalahari. There's no oil on the Kalahari.
100%. That is exactly how I looked at it. And I'm going to expect that if we looked hard enough and carefully enough, we would find some costs associated with that. I think the first place that I would look is obviously increased calorie density is going to put weight on people. And if we start looking at weight on people, even modest amounts of weight are going to be correlated with some negative health outcomes. Okay, so do I think is it as bad as Caldwell's team thought it was? No, because he was looking at some rhesus monkey studies with oil, and he was terrified that human beings had a similar pathogenic process with respect to oil, and he's told people don't eat any oil. So. But that's because that's what was suspected at the time, and there wasn't sufficient knowledge to be sure. So caution was in order, okay? And I think as increasing evidence came in, then it turns out, okay, it's not as bad as we thought, or it might not even be bad for cardiovascular disease. Fair enough, okay? We're willing to update, but we're not willing to wholesale say it's safe because we don't know. We just may know about a very narrow but important slice of health outcomes.
Is there a book called Dawn Over the Kalahari? Somebody's
Yes,
asking. Um,
yes.
so Donna is saying she searched far and wide and can't find the book. Where could one find it?
She can find it on Amazon. It's
Okay.
yeah, Dawn Over the Kalahari by Bird. It's an outstanding book.
Okay.
Yeah,
Keep looking. Keep
yeah.
looking, Donna. Thank you. All right. So this next question is very poignant. It's from Anonymous. Dear Dr. Lisle, I am not exaggerating when I say that, like Marlon Brando's character in On the Waterfront, I really could have been a contender, although I'm in a completely different field of work. The greatest chance of my professional life was destroyed by a competitor, similar to the way that Tanya Harding waged the attack on Nancy Kerrigan.
Yeah.
I am now nearing 70 years old, and it is too late for me to get another chance. How do I let go of the anger, bitterness, and deep resentment that has plagued me lo these many moons?
That's interesting. Um, it's a very interesting question, but let me explain why I can't answer it. I can't answer it because I would actually have to talk to the individual. The reason why you can't let go isn't what you think it is. The reason why you can't let go is your brain is designed, um, try to help me if I get lost here, AJ, because I'm going to go off tangent for a minute or
Yeah.
two. The minds of animals are actually calculating machines. They are biological computers. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to figure out how to use your time and energy in order to acquire resources that are necessary for what we call gene survival. So that might mean if you're 70 years old, it might be, how can I get my grandson into Harvard? Okay. That would be actually a way to try to improve your likelihood of your gene surviving. Because if he gets a fancy degree, then he gets a fancier girl, and then he gets a fancier girl, we got fancier great grandchildren, and then they're more likely to have mates the next generation. In other words, this all may seem silly, but that is precisely what the brain is doing. So the brain is out to acquire resources. You might say, well, gee, I'm past, I can't have any kids. What difference would that make? It's like, yeah, you're still after the very same resources that are involved in gene survival success. So you're after, in this case, esteem. So you are wanting to display a characteristic, the individual difference variable in humans that would be highly attractive to other people, either to trade with you and hire you for resources, or to be in love with you, or to be your best friend. And so that's the reason why you want to make those displays, whether it's acting, singing, basketball, art, whatever the hell it is. In other words, what a human being is after is esteem. And so you have been blocked by basically a competitive and nefarious actor from being able to display the gene quality that you had, and thereby be able to get all the esteem that you felt like you deserved. And that frustration sits in there. But the reason why you don't just let it go and move on is because your brain is calculating that there's something about this that you don't understand. And so this is what I call an open loop. So the brain would never torture you for the sake of torturing you and being bitter and angry. It would never do that. Okay. We find that most people that have been through some traumatic thing, no matter how bad it was, are more or less at baseline within 2 years. Okay. So they remember the traumatic event, but they're not being tortured by it every day. Every now and then they may have a fleeting thought. And when environmental circumstances come up to remind them, to warn them, they are now front and center, and that memory is front and center. Okay. So that's how traumatic effects work. In other words, but they don't torture the animal. There would be no evolutionary reason why that would ever be true, and it is not true. Okay. So if we have somebody that's spinning 40 years later on some issue, it's because the brain is investing the time and energy to try to learn the lesson. And it knows that it hasn't found the answer to the question because it does not have inner peace. If you understand why you made the mistake on the math test and you can see it, you can relax and you're like, got it, I won't make that mistake again. Now I understand how that works. And the same thing happens in life. Once we understand the reason why we had some tragic or negative outcome, then we've got inner peace. The brain no longer has to keep revisiting it. If it keeps revisiting it, it's because it hasn't learned the lesson and it doesn't know what the lesson is. And sometimes when it comes to situations like this, the person themselves cannot find it. Okay. So what I would tell you is, book a half an hour on my site. Okay. I have been fortunate enough as a psychologist with a knowledge and understanding of this, that I have probably unwound 5 or 6 extremely long-term open loops. Okay. They are really, really interesting. I've been very successful at it, and almost to a miraculous extent to the people that have been in the room with me. In other words, oh my God, I hadn't thought of exactly that. I didn't think about doing this, that, or the other. And now they have done them and they have succeeded and the loop is gone. Okay. So famously, I knocked over one in about 38 minutes that had been there for 50 years. Okay. So therefore that's what's going on with you. Your mind is searching, it lost, but it doesn't want to lose the lesson. And it is suspecting that it can find it. You're close. You almost have it figured out, but you don't quite have it figured out. And your brain has a tantalizing wisp of a great mathematician who damn near can solve an impossible theorem and keeps getting a feeling that they can solve it, but they can't quite solve it. Okay? And so that's the famous story of Fermat's last theorem. Some guy locked himself in a room for 7 years or whatever the hell it is, and he solved it, like some famous story in mathematics. Okay. But this is what's going on with decades-long open loops. There's a lesson. The system almost has it solved, can't quite solve it, keeps returning to it, can't get its hand around it. And then finally, maybe you get lucky because maybe somebody can help you solve it. And then we can let it go.
Yeah. Once the open loop is closed, can the person then get over the sadness and the regret as well?
Sure. In other words, the sadness and the regret those should have been gone a long time ago. Those resources are long since gone. Okay. So if the person isn't moving on from that, there's another thing that's going on. So for example, just to explain how this can work and how subtle it can be, that the person now can basically be thinking, son of a bitch, I deserve that status. And I didn't get it, and I got blocked from it, and I got cheated from it. Is there any possible way I can still get it? And the answer is yes, by bitching about it. That's the way. There's a way. There's still a loop open. It's like, hey, if I tell this story and I complain about it, and I get everybody to circle around, and everybody could see all the evidence about what I was capable of 50 years ago, but was unrealized because I got knocked off the train track by some actor, Tanya Harding, then maybe I can still recover the resource. Okay. And it's like, oh, that's interesting. That doesn't mean that the person is being deceptive. There could be that they're being self-deceptive, maybe neither. It can be just simply a gene survival resource acquisition algorithm that's inside the system that is looking to try to recover that resource. Okay. And a not completely unrelated example of this is I'm sure some people know, there's these famous physicists like Schrodinger and these quantum theorists in the Einsteinian period in physics, Heisenberg, all these guys. And there's a famous book called the Search for Schrodinger's Cat. Like, where is it? Is it in 2 places at the same time in a different form? This is all these deep concepts of quantum physics. And some poor dude can't remember his key to his Bitcoin. He bought a tremendous amount of Bitcoin when it was cheap, 10 cents a piece. So that fortune is now worth like $2 billion, and he can't remember it. So this is the search for Schrodinger's Bitcoin. Like, the Bitcoin's there. This is one of the world's great fortunes, but he sort of remembers what the passcode is, but he can't quite remember it. And every time he tries, it doesn't come up. So who knows? This poor guy is tortured by the search for Schrodinger's fortune. So anyway, one thing that obviously, hopefully people can hear, I've been down this road before. I understand the mechanics of the mind. I understand what the mind is up to. Pretty much. I mean, the human mind is a very complicated labyrinth of motivation. So I often miss things. And friends will be right with me in something, and I'll think I understood something, and they'll say, "Oh, but you didn't understand that." It's like, "Oh, I didn't." You know what I mean? So believe me, I'm highly fallible. However, but when it comes to tracking things like this down and trying to help people get some inner peace, you know, I've had some good success with it, and that's because if we look for the lesson. When you lose, let's make sure we don't lose the lesson, and that's what we're trying to do.
That makes sense. Thank you. I'm having trouble finding Dawn Over the Kalahari on US Amazon. I've only been able to find it on UK Amazon for some
Oh,
reason.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
Yep. Okay.
yeah,
That
yeah.
sounds like a great book. People are commenting like to know what to do is so confusing, especially in the plant-based world, because, for example, Dr. Furman and Dr. Esselstyn and Dr. McDougall strictly no oil, and doctors like Dr. Brian Clement love oil and think that fruit is bad. And do you know that guy, Brian Johnson? He's trying to like
No,
live. Yeah. Well, so there are people in the plant-based world, same thing with coffee and same thing with salt, really, that
yeah.
especially people that are newer, they feel like it's confusing to know what to
Yeah.
do.
Well, I think it is. I understand that. I would say, um, if you're wanting to get educated, I mean, there'd be a lot of different ways to do it. But, and if you're confused, the first three books that I would read would be The China Study, Whole, and The Future of Nutrition by Colin Campbell, being the lead author on all three books. That is going to be the most comprehensive. Like, I don't care if Dr. Schmo is some new plant-based doc that says it's okay to do X, Y, Z. Go back to the fundamentals and read, the most educated scientist in the history of the world in nutrition. Read his synthesis, read his research, get his message, and then you will be on extremely firm footing. Okay. And then, read The Pleasure Trap. And then after that, you read AJ's books. Bottom line is that I mean, I could point you to John McDougall's books, which are outstanding, but if you're confused and you're feeling like it's Dr. X versus Dr. Y and who knows, it's like, well, why don't you go back and read, if you're interested in nutrition and the science of nutrition, read the greatest scientist in the history of nutrition who ever lived. Let's read that guy. Let's read the fact that he wrote 3 major volumes, one of them published not that long ago. He's up to date. And at the end of that, see if you've got any questions. And if you do, email me. Okay.
Thank you.
You bet.
Do you want to do one more question?
One more question.
Okay, great. I think you've had a variation of this before. This is from Carrie. Dr. Lisle, I've been overweight most of my adult life. I'm now in my mid-60s and I need to lose 40 pounds. I've read the START Solution and the Maximum Weight Loss book from Dr. McDougall, and I know that we're supposed to eat until comfortably satisfied, but I have no idea what that feels like. I've lost my hunger and satiety cues. I'm rarely hungry. I went a whole day without eating and didn't get very hungry, and yet when I eat, I'm not sure when I'm satisfied. I'm rarely hungry when I eat. I think I've gotten in the habit of eating by the clock. Do you have any suggestions on how to relearn this important skill?
Well, it's not a skill, it's an okay? And you didn't lose it, it still exists. Okay, so I think all the things that I said earlier about aiming at an intermediate level calorie density, I think everything that you already heard me speak about, I think is relevant here. If you need to, and there wouldn't be any reason kind of not to do this, it's just that our whole message here for 40 years is that you don't need to do this. But if somebody feels like they're mystified and they're not sure and they don't quite believe and they're not sure how to approach this, you can weigh and measure your food. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. So I can tell you right now, if you're a woman that's 40 pounds overweight, if we have you on, say, 1,800 calories a day, you're perfectly fine. We can measure this thing out at 600 calories a pound, so we can have a nice diversity. And we can basically develop a very simple mathematical model, and you can eat that. If you can't tell when you're full and when you're not full because it all seems about the same, then believe me, then we're not going to have a problem eating 1,800 calories a day, because I know that that's damn close to that's almost right on top of what your biological satiety mechanisms would be. Because if you're overweight, those satiety mechanisms are going to try to clip about 10% of the calories that you would otherwise need to maintain your ideal weight. It's going to clip it by about 10% because it wants you to lose weight, because you actually have mechanisms inside of you that are designed to knock down the hunger drive and basically to try to help get your weight to a really healthy equilibrium. So I know that if I aim that at 1,800 calories, we're going to be fine. And so just eat 1,800 calories. Eat, I don't know, 400 in the morning, and then eat, 454 times, or however you want to do it. But that way you can go to bed at 7 o'clock and haven't eaten your last 450 calories, and you can eat 450 at 4 o'clock and 450 at 1 o'clock and 450 at 9 a.m. It's like whatever. And essentially it would take a little bit of math, not that much. If you got out of 7th grade math, this is math that you could do. It's not complicated. So we just go down through the thing, and we have little things that we like, and we piece it together, and we put together 3 meals or 4 meals or whatever it is. Eat your 1,800 calories and just do that day after day after day for a month, and let's see where we are. And my guess is we're going to be down 2-3 pounds, and we will not have fought any kind of hunger drive or anything else, because we should be nothing in the world wrong with being on a metronome with respect to your food. Our ancestors generally didn't do that. They would fluctuate more with little feast and famine processes, so day to day wasn't identical, but it can be identical. And if you actually put it on a basically identical process, the system will habituate and organize itself very well around that. So that's how you can do that.
Right. Dr. Lisle, I thought you might find this interesting. I wish Dr. McDougall was around to tell this too, because you know how we always say the fat you eat is the fat you wear. He was known for saying that. Well, I've been dealing for the last 5 weeks with pancreatitis, and I lost a lot of weight because the treatment is basically no food for quite a while, and then
Yes.
like cream of rice and then, broth, things like that. But I can't eat any fat, not just oil, not a single nut, seed, avocado, nothing, no fat right now. And good luck trying to gain weight eating no fat. It is really, really hard. So I've resorted to eating like loaves of sourdough bread. I mean, it's really hard to gain weight with no fat.
Yes. Interesting. Yeah. All right, AJ.
Hey, thanks. Very good. Very best of luck to you and Dr. Goldhammer.
Gotcha.
Okay,
All right.
take care, everybody.